Hello and welcome everybody to a new session or episode of 8 questions in 8 minutes. And today we're going to be addressing some very critical questions related to nutrition psychology. And for that, we have with us Professor April Hackert. Welcome to our show, April. Thank you for joining us today. We miss you in this region, and hopefully in the next year we'll be seeing you again in the Middle East. You've contributed to a lot of knowledge when it comes to nutrition psychology in the region back before COVID. And we're looking forward to see you again.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Let's start with our first question. How can dietitians identify and address nutrient deficiencies that may be contributing to a client's mental health issues?
Well, it's a great question first to ask. First of all, you have to learn what the key nutrients are that impact the brain before you can actually identify them and know whether or not they are in appropriate amounts. So first of all, you need to learn what the nutrients are. Secondly, you need to actually learn what the clinical signs of malnutrition related to those nutrients look like, and how also it looks across the lifespan. So that's very important. And then lastly, I would say you need to learn 3 to 4 foods that actually can correct the state of malnutrition for the specific brain nutrient. So there's 3 levels of knowledge that you have to get in order to fix this one.
Lovely. That takes us to our next question. Question number 2, what specific dietary interventions have you found most effective in improving mood and reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety?
First of all, you've got to get your blood sugar under control. That is the most important thing to be able to get a brain to function in a stable cognitive as well as neurophysiological state, is you have to have the blood sugar under control. Secondly, I would say you need to find a pattern of eating that works for you, not a pattern of eating that works for your brother or your mother, but you. And so whatever that may be, you need to be able to sustain that pattern. And then once you do that, the last level would be you need to increase your fiber. So specifically through color, fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds, whatever you can digest and or tolerate. But if you don't get those 3 phases down, you actually can't address the core issues of the symptoms. You're just actually treating the symptoms instead of getting to the core of it.
Superb. So pattern, individualization, and then going into the nutritional interventions. That takes us to our third question. Can you explain how probiotics and gut health play a role in mental well-being, and how dietitians can incorporate these into their nutrition plans for clients?
I would say that probiotics are probably one of the topics that are most discussed within the nutrition world, but also the least comprehensively understood, because probiotics can come in a pill form, they can come in food form, they can come in environmental forms, depending on your microbiota and the microbiome for whom you're sharing space. I would say the first and foremost with probiotics is we need to focus on the food first instead of the supplementation. But also, I would encourage you to not put a singular focus on probiotics. Probiotics are just one component of the mental health mystery that is using food for nutritional psychology and psychiatric benefits. So I would say don't give them too much more credit than what they need. But also the other part of this answer is that you actually have to monitor and ask your clients about their bowel movements and their stool habits, because the fecal matter that is coming out of the human is actually the result from the intervention, which is the eating that the client is doing. And that's where we are spending our time, is talking about the eating. So probiotics will be something we'll definitely talk a lot more about, but I would say focus on the food. Don't necessarily worry about supplementation right away, but all importantly, make sure you ask about bowel movements so that you know whether or not your interventions are being effective.
Lovely. That takes us to our fourth question. What are some practical strategies for dietitians to educate clients about connections between the diet and the mental health without overwhelming them?
Yes. Well, first of all, big deep breaths. When you get a question that you want to make a good answer with, you always take a good deep breath, find your feet. Specifically, you want to start off with your clients teaching them the anatomy and the physiology of the body. We are scientists. We are trained alongside our physician and nursing and social worker colleagues. And so it's very important that we as dietitians in our training of our clients, that they can come into you with informed education and knowledge about where they're experiencing symptoms in the physical body. And then also by your own questioning and using more in-depth motivational interviewing strategies, you can then get them to start monitoring their symptoms and giving you feedback of whether or not the nutritional interventions are happening the way that they need to. So in summary, patient and client empowerment for them to take the lead of their mental and physical health, but more importantly, you as the clinician giving them the tools that they need so they can take the lead. They have to be able to tell you where in the body is being impacted by their nutritional interventions.
Which takes us to our fifth questions. How can dietitians effectively collaborate with mental health professionals to provide holistic care for clients experiencing mental health challenges?
Well, this is my favorite question so far. How do we collaborate most effectively? You have to take an assertive ownership of what you know and no one else does. Dietitians are food and nutrition experts. We are the people who study the biochemistry, the physiology, the behavioral, the epigenetics, the genetics, all of the things related to food and the eating experience, whether or not it's consuming the food, procuring the food, or even disposing of the food, which is also a whole nother topic of conversation. But I would say do what you do best and do it uniquely and do it critically, but do it in a collaborative mindset, because you also have to understand that putting more attention into your food, whether or not you are a dietitian or whether or not you're a physician or a nurse or a social worker, that's self-care. And you're never going to go wrong with doing more self-care for your mental health and your well-being. So own what you know, own what you do best, and then give your clients permission so that they can put time and energy into their own self-care through eating and cooking.
Lovely. That takes us to our sixth question. What role does personalized nutrition play in managing mental health conditions, and what are the key considerations for creating a personalized plan?
Right. Well, personalized nutrition is the new hot phrase that has come out in our post-pandemic world related to mental health and mental well-being, is whether or not it's getting a microbiome sample or whether or not it's an epigenetic report where we can find out what mutations that we have. I think the most important thing that you want to take a look at in the clinical world is you want to look at your family history and you want to see what clinical symptoms are showing up that are different than your family history. So if you have a history of heart disease and substance use disorder in your family, and these are symptoms that you're finding in your own life, that's not really a surprise. But if you're someone who has never had any family histories of cancers or any mental health issues, and then now you're experiencing that, I think that the personalized nutrition movement and responsibility that we want our clients to have, it actually is a source of empowerment for you to make calculated interventions. If cardiovascular disease is the number one thing that you're dealing with, then you have to understand that vascular health is also related to brain vascular health, which is then going to be a risk for stroke, and then it's going to be a risk for dementia. And that's where the medical psychiatric boundary doesn't actually exist. It's a continuum. It's a continuum of symptoms that manifest itself. So from the personalized nutrition side, if you are able to see a vulnerability that you have based upon genetics or based upon a family history, once again, it gives you another opportunity to engage in self-care, and it gives you another opportunity to use the food-based interventions that'll help your brain and body deal with that issue before it becomes an actual critical issue.
Very well said. Let's take to the seventh question. Can you share some success stories or case studies where dietary changes have significantly improved a client's mental health, and what are the key factors of those successes?
Absolutely. Well, I'm not going to give too much away because you have to come to the training to get more of the details, but we'll work through all of them. I think one of the biggest case study successes that I had was while working into the correctional or forensic system here in the United States. I had the pleasure of working in 3 states here in the United States. And one of the most successful clients that I had was a United States Navy veteran who had post-traumatic stress disorder, and he was in a maximum security psychiatric facility, and he was following a religious diet, but he was having constipation and he didn't know how to actually deal with this issue, and he was very angry, and he would keep getting these demerits because he would act out in anger when someone would try to tell him something. He had no emotional control. So I got consulted to work with him, and it turns out that he was constipated, and it turns out that his fiber content was incredibly low. He wasn't actually eating hardly any complex carbohydrates. He was eating mostly refined carbohydrates when he ate them, and then a lot of protein. So we did some interventions. We had some good conversations, and then he started moving his body because there's not a lot of activity that is flexible in that setting. He started moving his body, and after about 3 days and increasing his fiber, he had a very large bowel movement and felt amazing. And he actually started getting at some of his anger issues because his gut regularity was allowing him to feel his feelings. And at the end of about 6 weeks together, he actually is a big softie, and he had a lot of trauma related to the death of a girl in his world. And he was so thankful and grateful because he learned about fiber, he learned about his mood, and he learned about that during his PTSD triggers that he actually has an opportunity once again to engage self-care. So that's one. And then real quick, I think the other one that's really exciting, especially in our now post-pandemic world, we have a lot of our loved ones who are getting older in time, which both of us are a little older than the last time we saw each other too, is that the elderly population who loses a mate and then has to start feeding themselves and cooking for themselves. I had an elderly woman who was in her early 70s, and she lost her spouse, and she developed a severe deep depression because she also developed gastritis. And her medical providers told her to eliminate foods. And those were the foods that she was accustomed to eating with her spouse. And so not only did she eliminate the foods from her diet, but she also eliminated the memory of eating with him. And so I found her in a very, very severe state of depression. I served as sort of a surrogate family person to listen to her, gave her education about types of fiber, gastritis, helped her heal. And at the end, she was connecting with her grandkids and making them all of her favorite family meals. So those are just two. I'm not going to give too many more away, but I think some things like that are really exciting ways to look ahead.
That takes us to our last question. What advice do you have for dietitians on staying up with the latest research and development in the nutrition psychology world to enhance their practice?
Wow. Well, great question. I think given the fact that we're now established in the literature under nutritional psychiatry, and then also in my own expertise in nutritional neuropsychology of how that psychological component and the attachment that we have to the eating relationship, we're established in the literature now. There's no need to wonder whether or not this is a real thing. It is absolutely a real thing. So what I would encourage you to do is once a month, take an hour out of your day, out of your work day, and go into a research search engine, whether or not it's PubMed or Scopus or Google Scholar or a food chemistry research, whatever subject interests you. Go into there, type some keywords, and try to come up with some keywords that actually you're interested in, whether or not it's food, mental health, psychology, behavior, and see what is going on in the literature. Stay on top of it. Know what questions are being asked at present. And then also, I would say lastly, is to learn something new related to the brain and the body and the gut, whether or not it's neurophysiology, whether or not it's how to set up an EEG, whether or not it's how to actually learn about celiac disease. Who knows? But what I would encourage you to do is to find out what's going on in the literature, stay on top of that, and then pick a new subject that you want to learn and become a master of it. You don't need to become an expert of it. Become a master of it and then move on to the next one. And within a couple of years, you'll be amazed at what you know.
Lovely, lovely. And as you mentioned, when you want to learn about the mind gut, It's a complementation of the actual psychology, medical, and as well as the nutrition world. April, as usual, it's been a great pleasure to have you. And thank you for your information and sharing your expertise and your success stories on 8 questions in 8 minutes. Thank you all for watching this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.